This lesson will focus on the LASTON method and how to apply it to prose passages. So if you haven't watched the LASTON video, I suggest that you do that first and also pre-read this story before viewing this video. We're not going to focus on imagery, symbols, and themes for the sake of time. For this passage, we're only going to focus on Miss Mallard and her characterization. What I'd suggest that you do at the end of your prose passages before beginning writing essays is to write the mnemonic LASTON. Also, put a reminder at the bottom of your paper that for characterization, you should have adjectives or nouns. For example, Miss Mallard is, and then you would list adjectives, or is a, and list nouns. You also might want to just write, but also, just as a reminder that you should be writing about complexity. Remember that your characters are not going to be one-dimensional. So let's jump right in this story here. Knowing that Miss Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. So out beside this paragraph, I would just write O for others. This is what other people think about Miss Mallard, that she's frail, delicate, that she needs taken care of. She needs to be protected. It was her sister Josephine who told her in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of the killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. So again, this paragraph here is also about others. So we have two other characters, Josephine and Richards, who were there to protect her. She did not hear the story, as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. What's interesting here is that the narrator inserts a little thought here. The narrator is saying that Miss Mallard isn't like traditional women. She's different. How does she act? Right here. She wept at once with sudden wild abandonment in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. So the rest of the paragraph is about her actions. What does she do? She's passionately weeping, and then she becomes silent and goes to her room alone. And she demands that nobody follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. All right, so let's see. There isn't much to this one in terms of the LASTON. We can see that she sinks down into the chair. So that would be actions. As well as the next paragraph, they're both kind of descriptions of what she's looking at. So she could see the open square before her house, the tops of trees that were all aquiver with the new spring life. I will point out that she is still, everything else is moving. Let's see. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares, the notes of a distant song which someone was singing reaching her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. Notice this is what she's looking at again. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. All right, so we could just sort of leave those as descriptions, but we could start again right here with her actions. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her, as a child who has cried itself to sleep continues to sob in the dreams. So again, she's just sitting. She's allowing, she's sort of being passive. She's allowing herself to grieve. And then it says she was young, with a fair, calm face, whose lines bespoke repression and even a certain strength. So we see a little difference here. The narrator's telling us a little bit about her. Let's see. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. So again, we see that she is looking out and she's thinking, but we don't entirely know what she's thinking, but the narrator says that it's something intelligent. So again, she's looking. The narrator also contradicts, again, maybe what other people may view of women at the time. The next bit. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name, but she felt it creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that fills the air. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her two white, slender hands would have been. These two paragraphs right here, I kind of read them together because they're both about her thoughts, but also her actions, because she's just sitting there thinking, but again, we don't entirely know exactly what she's thinking. The narrator doesn't reveal that. We do know that she's allowing herself to think. We do know that she's starting to breathe quickly, which suggests that her heart is starting to race. She's having some sort of inner conflict. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped from her slightly parted lips. It said over and over under her breath, "Free, free, free." The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. So first of all, we see the first time that she speaks. And what does she speak? Free. Then we also see her actions, which is that her eyes are light, her pulse is beating fast, and she's starting to relax. It says relaxing every inch of her body. So she had been quite tense. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have a right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. All right, so here we see that she's again thinking. So we see her thoughts here, and we see her thoughts right here as well. We do see one thing that she does right here, and she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. So we do see that that's one thing that she actually does for actions. And yet she loved him sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of this possession of self-assertion, which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? So perhaps this is one of the last times that we really see here of what she's thinking about, because right after this, we see a shift. So she's talking right here. She's whispering. So this would be her speech. Free, body and soul free, she kept whispering. And if you notice a little bit above there, Chopin seems to be saying that the body and the soul are perhaps one. All right, we see another little shift here. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door. I beg, open the door. You'll make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? For heaven's sake, open the door. So we see what other people are thinking, other people are saying. They're very concerned about her. This is the only other time right here that Miss Mallard speaks. Or it's different because she has been talking to herself, And notice that it's she was saying free, and now she's saying go away. I am not making myself ill. No, she was drinking in the very elixir of life through the open window. So she speaks in opposites, either free, open, or closed. Go away, and she's argumentative. The last little bit right here seems to be where she's thinking and also have a few actions at the same time. Her fancy or her thoughts were running right along those days ahead of her. Spring days and summer days and all sorts of days would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday that she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. So first of all, we see some thoughts and maybe actions. We even see here that she did pray, didn't say exactly what, but there's some of her things that she said. And this next paragraph are about her actions. Let's see what she does. She rose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunities. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them. So we see here, this is an amazing transformation, that she is like a goddess of victory. She has triumphed. She has, in a very short space of an hour, she has conquered her demons, so to speak. Someone was opening the front door with a latchkey. It was Brentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident and did not even know there had been one. So where was he? He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. But Richard's was too late. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. So the last action that we have of her is that she dies of joy that kills. All right, so let's just take a moment to look over our comments, and we'll see which ones we see more of. So I'm just going slow, be looking at the right of your screen. And I will say that with most passages that are on the AP exam, you will, well, I've never seen one that has where you could write about all LASTON: looks, action, speech, thoughts, other thoughts, and narrator's thoughts. Usually it's only 2 to 3. So we could just scratch off this looks because we don't entirely know much about, just very little. We definitely see her actions, and we see a little bit of her speech. We see some of her thoughts. We don't have exact thoughts. And then finally, we definitely see others' thoughts and some of the narrator's thoughts. So this is an unusual passage in that there's so many of them. But for the sake of this, I would probably not deal with looks, narrator's thoughts, and maybe not even so much speech. You'd focus on her actions, thoughts, and others' thoughts. So then that kind of gives you an idea of where to go from here. I'm just going to jot down a few things. It'd be a good idea if you stopped the video now and wrote some of your own just to practice. It should only take you a minute. So hopefully you wrote a few things. So we could say that she's delicate or frail, but then she's also, she's also strong. You could say that she is passive, but she's also accepting. She's repressed and imprisoned, yet she's also free and independent. Definitely by the end of the story, right? We also see that she's intelligent and that she's emotional. I don't really have any dichotomies there. A couple other things is that she moved from being full of dread she moved into acceptance and then into excitement. And another thing that you can do out beside when you're writing, for example, speech, is you could sum up very briefly what the paragraph is about. So that way, when you go in to write, you won't have to read the whole passage all over again. Good luck.